After e4, e6, d4, d5, knight c3 and bishop b4, the Winawer is happening. As we've seen in many of the previous videos, we have to play with e5 now, and after c5, a3, attacking the bishop. So in this video we're going to go through something new, obviously. After bishop takes and pawn takes back, the novelty will be either the move queen to a5 now, with the idea of queen to c4. It's an annoying variation that it's important to know what to do against. It's one of the sidelines, but it's happening quite a lot recently, so I decided to make a video about it. And the other move is the more normal knight c6, which leaves black open to possibilities on how to go on next, like queen c7, queen a5, queen a5. There could be lots of transpositions. Let's start with queen a5 right now. Bishop d2 comes now. Two moves we're going to look at: knight e7 or queen a4. Anyway, let's do queen a4 for example. h4 is the best move. The center is completely closed. We can start pushing on the side. And now it's important for black to make sure he get the timing right, because the idea of this variation, the queen a5 move with queen a4, is to put pressure on c2 and take this pawn, which happens to be not poisoned, as soon as our queen leaves. And the idea is to play c4, and our bishop is locked in here, so we can never play a move like bishop to d3 to protect that pawn. And so that's how black wants to play. But black will have to be careful, because if black plays c4 now, after we played h4, black plays c4, we can already play queen g4, and now black, it's too late for black to play knight e7, because we already have a pawn in h4. So let's say knight to e7, and the thematic queen takes, rook to g8, and now queen to h7. It's like the position is evaluated as if we were up a piece, for the simple reason that now we are still defending this pawn, and the whole plan of queen a5, queen a4 to put pressure on this pawn failed, and now we're just up 2 pawns. Besides, this is an advanced pawn, and we're going to play h5, h6. And in this position, if black plays g6, then okay, we play h5 obviously, and this is just a bad move. Our opponent cannot just go for the pawn in c2, because we're threatening to take this pawn and then go up to g7. And queen to c2 now doesn't work, because you're going to play rook to c1, and the queen's going to have to go. Now you can argue that the queen can go to f5 or to f4. Well, f4 you can take, pawn takes back, destroying the pawn structure. You're also going to take in c4. There's no reason to go through such a line. Queen to f5, you'll play queen to e2, and you're threatening g4, which traps the queen, and it will force white to play like this, queen e4, and now take. We go up a pawn, and then we can, it's not just up a pawn. We do have a perfect pawn structure. Our opponent will not have any pawn structure at all. So in this position, after h5, what if knight to e7 now? Okay, the queen will have to go back to d1 to protect this pawn. Knight b to c6, normal development. Okay, we take. And after pawn takes back, only move to allow development of the rook on an open file later on, probably after castling as well. But either way, even if black are taken with the knight, you have this idea of bishop h6. This is a really strong move, and should win your pawn no matter what. Bishop d7 speeding up development, bishop g7. Rook moves, and now we take in h7. We win a pawn, and after castle, there is no compensation for black, especially because the game is closed. Now you're going to play bishop f6, pinning the knight. Rook moves to unpin the knight. Okay, g4. That stops knight f5. Black is completely paralyzed. Can't move the rook to swap with ours because we have this bishop. Can't move the knight anywhere. This knight, even if he goes to a5, it's not like he's actually trying to go anywhere. There is literally no moves for black. If black plays g5, the idea of playing knight g6, then we play knight h3. And we're winning more material. Besides, we also have a passed pawn here. Position is evaluated as if we were up a piece. So let's take it from the start to understand more. Okay, d5, knight c3, bishop, e5, c5, attack the bishop. Bishop takes, pawn takes, queen a5 variation. Bishop d2, immediately unpinning the c3 pawn. The variation with queen a4, h4. And now let's look at the immediate knight e7. Okay, rook b1 comes now. for a good reason. Obviously, bishop b5 wins the game. So after knight b to c6, h5. And we're going to play h6. Let's look at this move. Pawn takes here. Now there's like an attack in e5. Here we play bishop b5. And the queen will have to move. Queen a5, and you can just take back in d4. You got both pawns. Here you're completely safe and you carry on. You got the bishop pair. And the game is still closed but opening up a bit. If queen takes the pawn instead, now we recapture this pawn. The center is perfect. It's opening up a bit and we're threatening rook h3. Now the queen's got nowhere to go. Notice that, except a2. But nothing changes from there. But black's best move according to the engine is a6. But now rook to h3. And the queen is completely trapped. I mean, she will have to go to a2, is the only square. But then she remains trapped. After bishop to d3, the queen cannot move anymore. It's a terrible position to play. Position evaluated +4 or something like that. Think about it. In this position, when white plays rook h3, the best move according to the engine is to take the bishop. And after rook takes queen, rook takes back, basically give a queen for rook and bishop. Knight e2 comes now, and you can take it from here. You're playing up material. Should be a relatively fine endgame to play. So in this position, instead of c takes d4, what happens if black just goes on with development? Bishop d7, h6 comes now. That's the move you want to play. g6, but now there's a weakness on the dark squares, and our opponent doesn't have the dark square bishop. Knight f3, castle, queen to c1, protecting the pawn in a3, and now threatening bishop b5 once again. Pawn takes, bishop b5 comes. Queen to a5 with an attack on the queen now by making this cover attack and keep the center safe. Queen back to c7. Bishop to g5. Rook unpins the knight. The black player unpins the knight, but still bishop to f6. Rook moves, but now c3, giving extra protection to this pawn in d4. a6 attacking the bishop. How do we respond to this? Bishop f1. We don't trade the bishop f. There's no reason. Knight f5 now is not a problem. You kick it up at g4, so the knight will have to go back. And now knight to g5 should end the game. And we have a very, very strong pawn in the h file. So from the start, let's understand more of this. Okay, bishop e4. And now a5, c5, a3, attack, take. The early queen a5 move, bishop d2. And now instead of queen a4 now, what happens after knight e7? Normal development move. This kind of stops us from playing queen g4 with the idea of taking here and g7 and take the other pawn. Because if you think about it, well, first of all, queen g4 is the best move now. But now it looks like our opponent can make it in time to castle. But no, because now we play bishop to d3. And this is really dangerous. This cannot be met with c4, removing the bishop from that square simply because of the sacrifice. Bishop takes, king takes, queen h4 check, picks the knight again. This also cannot be met with knight to g6. Because you will go on and play h4 and then dismiss the knight from that square, and it's as easy as it gets, because you're also going to have the rook coming in the game. c4 now, take the knight. Pawn takes, the rook is now on an open file, the queen can go and join the defense of the king, yet we are doing so much better. Because h5, and we're taking this pawn as well. The pawn can't push because we're attacking it multiple times. And this is a completely winning endgame. So in this position, queen to g4. Now you could say that this could be met with knight f5. Okay, no, because bishop to d3. And when we're done taking this knight, we can go to g7. And that's a serious problem for black. If castle, knight f3 is the best move. c4 attacking the bishop. Now this is provoking that. Okay, take. Queen to g3. Keeps the attack on this file. The bishop is joining the knight as well. You might play h4, h5, h6 if you want. But that's over. And in this position, if instead of knight f5, what if knight g6? Okay, you know the pattern, h5. And what if h4 and then h5 to stop that? Okay, queen g3. c4 now, how do we react? We play bishop e2. Well, obviously we're not able to go to d3, but the bishop is attacking this pawn, meaning that our opponent has compromised the king side, because if black ever castles, then this pawn will fall. Knight c6, knight h3, bishop d7, queen to g5. And now we're just planning to take this pawn. So let's make an example. If black plays b5, right? Bishop h5 is the best move. We're also attacking this knight. And the knight is pinned, by the way, because then you're going to take this pawn. So you're going to also win the pawn in g6. So our opponent will have to do something about it. Queen to d8, trying to swap rook to b1, surprisingly. Rook to b8, protecting the attack on the b7 pawn. Knight to g1 is the best move. Crazy enough, but that's the best move. And by the way, queen swapping here, when you take back with the pawn, you're going to have double attack over this pawn in h5, so it's not convenient. What happens after the b5? Okay, we take this pawn, as we mentioned. Okay, after the swap, we take the pawn, the rook is defending the bishop. a5, looks like the black player might try to do something here, but there is absolutely nothing happening. It's all well defended. Look how many pieces and pawns are attacking in b4, so he's not going anywhere. Knight e2 comes now. b4, okay, well, c takes, a takes, a takes. There's nothing, just don't worry. White's completely winning here. So back in this position, what if black plays g6? Okay, knight f3. Knight developing to c6, and now, surprisingly, we take this pawn in c5. It's crazy, because we're leaving this pawn here, we're tripling this up. Queen takes c5, queen to g5 comes, and after bishop d7 developing, bishop to d3. Long castle, rook to b1. Now we're going to look at two options, one of them being knight f5, the other one queen takes in a3. If knight to f5 seems to make sense, but no, you play queen f6 and you're infiltrating. Rook d to f8 to protect that pawn, because we wanted to take that pawn and these pawns are not poisoned. g4, the knight has to move again, goes to e7, white castles. Position evaluated +3. White is planning to play rook to b5 and doubling up the rooks. This cannot be avoided, let's say, with a6, because now the plan changes. Yes, it's true, but there's more weakness, more dark square, weak dark squares around the opponent, and you're just going to play rook to b3 and you're going to pile up and go for it. If black plays b5, stopping all of that from happening, then that reduces the freedom of the queen enough to allow us to play bishop e3. The rook is defending a3, so we're going to leave it there, completely winning. Position +5. Let's just look at the other variation. The one when here instead of knight f5 is just an idea to show you what to do next, what the plan is. Queen f6 and infiltration. What if queen takes the pawn in a3? Again, queen f6, that's the plan we're going for. Knight a5 with the idea of going to c4, castle, knight to c4, rook to e1. So the queen will have to be careful. Queen to c5, bishop takes. So surprising, because the deep takes e5 move was very surprising, and now giving up the bishop pair for this knight when this could be taken in two different ways. But it's all about development, because you see, if our opponent takes us with the queen, we can take the knight. So it has to take with the pawn, bishop e3. And this infiltration here with the rook and the support of the other rook, plus this super strong dark square bishop, is going to be the end of the game. If black reacts with knight to d5, counterattacking the queen, just take this rook with check, and that's it. Okay, so we're going to look at something completely different now. Well, not completely different, because all patterns always look the same in chess, but still, e5, c5, attack, take, take. What happens when black plays the early knight to c6? Okay, queen to g4 comes anyway. And now, there's a few options that we need to explore. Let's see, for example, if knight to e7, remember, this is not a transposition into the queen c7 variation, because the queen c7 has not happened here. Anyway, queen g7, rook g8, queen takes pawn. And after pawn takes, now there's an attack here, and if we take back, there's also an attack here in d4. we play f4 to support this pawn. It's important not to lose the e pawn. The d4 and the c3 pawns don't matter in the when you play against the Winawer. Queen a5 now, attacking here. How do we respond to this? Queen back to d3. Queen swapping everything. Okay, take. It looks like a good center for black. This pawn may support it, but actually it's just rubbish. Knight f3. Bishop d7. The only way to develop that stupid bishop. King f2, long castle. And now g3. The plan here is to play bishop to d3, rook to b1, h4, and then knight to be placed in g5, and then the pawn will go up. So what happens after d4? Okay, bishop d3, knight to d5 now for black. Looks like a well-placed knight, but still, rook to b1. The plan here will have to go something like this: rook to e1, and you just carry on h3, g4, and then even king to g3. This is what you should do if you had the chance to move again and again, if our opponent doesn't play the best moves. So if black goes on, let's say, with f6, right? Now, obviously, we can't go on with that plan because our opponent has made a move that forces a reply from us. If black had played another move like a6, right, then you could go on with that plan. So you gotta make sure you don't just learn stuff by heart, but you learn the patterns by heart, not the moves. f6, you take it. Knight takes back, and now rook to e1. Our knight and pawn make sure that the e5 push never happens, and this bishop will remain bad. Knight to g4 check. Into g2. Nothing to fear but the dark. a6. h3 kick the knight away. Knight h6. Knight to g5 comes. We're going to close the line here. Position evaluated plus 250, so even black playing the absolute best moves, engine moves basically, in a faulty variation, managed to survive to this point, but still, it's a winning endgame. Rook d to e8 is the best move, but you carry on with knight e4. And there are more forks here than there are in a spaghetti restaurant. Okay, space now for the last variation before closing this video. And I think this will be the end for the Winawer saga. So, e5, c5, a3, take. Knight to c6. Knight to c6 early, queen to g4. What happens after king to f8? The best move, obviously the main move in this line. This is actually completely safe for black. Okay, a4. Let's talk about the plans here. So, black needs to develop. Knight g to e7, knight f3. Knight to g6, bishop to d3. h5, attacking the queen. But before we do that, let's look at f5 and then h5. So f5 now, you take en passant. The queen takes back, and now queen to g3. Preparing to maybe go to d6 with a check and win a pawn. If e5 comes, then bishop g5 is just very strong because queen e6, you take the pawn here. Knight takes, and now long castle. Black is completely winning here because the defense of the king has been dismantled. The king is extremely vulnerable. This is an insanely pleasant position to carry on now. And in this position, if the queen goes to f7, well, okay, knight takes here in e5. Knight takes, pawn takes, bishop e6 developing, castle short, c4 reducing the influence of our bishop, bishop e2 is forced to go to e2, h6 attacking the bishop, bishop to e3. So looks like here the black player has been able to resist, but remember, we're up a pawn, we've got the bishop pair, the opponent king is no longer very safe. If king to g8 now, with the idea of playing king to h7 and then just play a normal game, develop the rooks and everything, remember, you're playing bishop to h5 and you got two attackers. Bishop to f5 defending it, f4 solidifying everything, king to h7, the idea of playing queen to e6, still keeping an eye on this, and then allowing to move the rook and maybe carry on to a normal game. But position has been evaluated +3, over +3 for a while. queen to f2, and now queen to e6, as mentioned, also prevents idea of g4, apparently, although no, it doesn't, because g4 comes anyway, we're winning a piece. If the bishop moves or takes, we're pushing f5. So let's say bishop takes, f5 comes with an attack on the queen, and it's game over, completely over. And in this position, if your opponent had chosen to play to d7 in order not to be too close to the knight and get forked by the pawn, h3, the idea of playing g4, and nothing stops that from happening, unless you think that our opponent might move the knight. Okay, well, the attack is too strong anyway, there's just too many pawns. Besides, now the best move is bishop to a7, a bit cheeky, going to take a completely useless pawn over there. Okay, well, let's see now, g6, attacking the bishop, and preparing rook to g8 with, on an open file. Bishop f3. Okay, rook to g8, looks like black might play a normal game, but now bishop to c5. g5, try to open the file for the rook. This is met with bishop e7, and then the bishop simply captures the pawn here. There's no compensation. Okay, you might argue the pawn can take in f4 with an attack here and here, but you know, you're attacking this rook. Black just doesn't make it in time to do anything decent. Okay, back in this position when black was just placed the king in f8, and we play a4. Knight g to e7, knight f3, knight g6, bishop d3, and now let's go through h5, attacking the queen. Queen to g3, staying relevant. Pawn takes in d4, we capture back. And now, what to do? Well, most of these patterns that will occur now have been seen before. Alright, so if you've watched the entire Winawer saga, you know exactly how to navigate this type of position. What I'm going to mention is a line that hasn't been mentioned before, because if black plays h5, right, obviously you know that you can just mess around in the g file without worrying. I think I showed this in the previous or two videos ago. So let's look at this line, knight c to e7. The idea is to go to f5 with the knight. Okay, it's important that you pin it. Bishop g5, okay, queen a5 check, bishop d2. Okay, queen has to go, bishop to, let's say, b6, castle. What you need to understand here is that black can't really make a plan. There's absolutely nothing to do. Can't move this knight anywhere that makes sense. Pushing this pawn is pointless because you can go to g4. Even if the queen had chosen c7 rather than b6, still, it's not like you can really play this b5 or even a6 b5 because there's too much attack over there to prevent that from happening. Bishop to d7, yeah, but it's not like you can castle long. Okay, let's say bishop to b7, fine. Rook f to b1. Every white piece is playing. Okay, queen to c7, keeping an eye on b7. a5. Just waiting until black runs out of moves. There's nothing to be taken, captured, or even targeted. h4. You play queen g4, as I mentioned already. Now you might argue, what about h3 now? Isn't this a good move for black? It's interesting, but you just play g3. This also stops potential future rook h4 moves. Remember, the black king can't castle anymore. So let's say black wants to play knight to f5 with the idea of king e7, getting the rook like this, and then castle manually. Not that it's ever gonna be safe, right? But still, let's look at this. Knight f5. Okay, white plays knight to g5. The idea is to take this pawn for free, and there's no way to stop that from happening. Unless black plays knight to h6 with the idea of attacking the queen. If you take, maybe some threatening discover checks, but there is nothing actually, so don't worry about it. Okay, well, let's look at this. King e7. The rooks are connected and looks dangerous. Rook a3, and after rook to f8 to allow the king to castle, and also to play f6, the idea of taking and then going on an open file, because obviously rook g8 would have been too bad. Well, bishop to b4 will end this because you're winning the exchange. Okay, then what about rook to e8? The thing is that every single black file is closed, and the c file is the only one that is open, but this bishop is defending the pawn in c2, these pawns are completely blockaded, so there's no way to infiltrate anywhere here. The h file is open, but if you attack the queen with knight f5, you can retreat the queen just like where you were before. And here, now, still, the bishop b4 is still the best move. The king moves and now bishop to d6. This queen is on borrowed time. If the queen goes back to c8, the best move is queen to h6, winning a knight. Whatever way black chooses to take back allows knight f7 checkmate. And if the queen instead goes to c6, now rook a to b3 should be enough to end this game.